Hello there, I am CouchCoop and welcome to my video about the new Horizon Forbidden West scores. We're going to talk about Cyberpunk, the new console versions as well, and I've kind of got a few points I want to cover with the review of this massive AAA PlayStation exclusive game coming out on the Monday of that week, and we've all got to tiptoe around loads of content to make sure we don't ruin things for ourselves come Friday. If you have known me as a YouTuber for a long time, you might remember that I used to get games well before release, just like the big name reviewers, and it used to smash my numbers. I don't have access to that resource anymore. Being back in the UK has changed a lot, so I'm on the same level as everybody else, sitting there waiting for my copy to turn up on Friday. Let's talk about the review scores, and let's talk about the bigger independent reviewers. ACG and Shillup have done a really good job. ACG even comparing it to a modern Breath of the Wild for the Sony system. Wow, but it's doing extremely well. Over at IGN, they've given it a 9 out of 10, which is fair enough. That's a pretty damn good score, and I can think of droves or loads of games that have reached that score that are pretty phenomenal and probably deserve a bit more. But here's the thing, Deathloop got 10 out of 10, and if you've seen my recent single player PlayStation 5 video, you'll know that Deathloop is no mold breaker. It is not a 10 out of 10, and Arkham, even though were amazing, just didn't come up with the best game of that year, not by a long stretch. There were a few other factors involved, I think, in making sure that game scored well. Dodginess on IGN's review score front is no new thing. That's not a revelation. I just think that's a bit of a kick in the proverbials for Guerrilla, and of course it's been a 5-year stint for them, and in the final stages they had a worldwide pandemic. The game's still looking phenomenal regardless. Now the next point is kind of huge and kind of quite awkward as well, because my PlayStation 5 sits proudly as the centerpiece to my lounge, and I point it out to everybody that comes around my couch that I own one. Do I turn it on for anything other than Returnal? No. And this was, I thought, like an idiot, was going to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive because of its scope was going to be so colossal. And of course, drips and drabs, we realised that it's coming out on the PlayStation 4 base model system, a system that came out in 2013.
Aaron was away from camp, scouting. I bet he's still out there.
Why is this a bad thing, you may ask? You run a PlayStation channel, for God's sake. Surely the more versions of this on the more systems the better. Well, yes is the answer to that question, but I'm now starting to look at things like this. When you produce or make a video game, you have a certain scope of CP and GPU that you're going to have access to the systems that you're going to release it on. Normally, you are going to have to go with the base model system as your limit for the template or framework of the game itself. It's not going to be able to run or look completely different on the other versions. It all has to level down to the lowest system that it's rolling out on. A brilliant example of how that goes extremely wrong is Cyberpunk 2077, which we'll get to in a second, and you just saw that it couldn't or wouldn't run on those lower level systems because those guys went all out on using the current gen technology available. Because I'm pretty sure that if this game was being made for the PlayStation 5 only, that they would have had access to a hell of a lot more scope, range, size, creative freedom than they do now, because it has to be able to run on a lower level system. A strange example of that is Returnal. Technically, because of its lighting and speed, it just can't run on anything lower than the Ryzen chip that's in the PlayStation 5. Also, its procedural generation probably takes up quite a lot of memory, but my point being is that game is phenomenal because it was built for that machine. So for all of that stress to get hold of that PlayStation 5 and all of that money and all of that weight, I'm only looking at a variant option for performance or fidelity. It's really just a visual click up. There's nothing that points towards the PlayStation 5's power increasing the size or scope of this game. Now that brings me over to Cyberpunk very quickly. Today we had an announcement that they're going to be doing a live stream, which is coming out on the 15th, and they're going to announce dates for the PlayStation 5 and S and Xbox One X versions of the game, i.e. the current gen, the version of the game that everyone has just been sat on their ass waiting to play since day one of launch. I really thought that they would have rolled out a PlayStation 5 version of this game a year ago. It's absolutely ridiculous, the situation we're in. Obviously they had all of that mass, I don't know what happened. There must have been a bit of a walkout, a bit of a sacking, new teams coming in. God only knows. The disruption must have been huge. But tomorrow, watch this space. I'll keep my eye on it. And of course, if we get an announcement for 1.5, which I very much doubt they'll tie in with that launch, I don't know. There's going to be rumours about them renaming soft launches. You guys probably saw my speculation video. That one's just so interesting, and it brings me over to this whole current gen, past gen straddling that developers are having to do at the moment. It's all just going to end in tears at some point. Well, it did for CDPR on a grand scale. Will I be reviewing Forbidden West? Probably not. I didn't realise that there wasn't going to be an embargo and that the big names were going to get it nearly a full week before. I mean, they're all pushing out their content today. Testing out a massive open world game like this in that short a time is probably not recommended, and I'll add it to a list. I'll peg it against everything else that's available on the system, and of course other PlayStation 5 open world games. I think that's what we're interested in here, is how much of a revolutionary tech example is this for our PlayStation 5 systems? Well, nothing that revolutionary, because it all has to be done on the Pro and the full base game.
Peace, the exception.
I can imagine you can all tell how wound up I am about this. Not only am I miffed that I don't get my early games anymore and 20,000 views from the SEO neat search, quite literally people just pumping in Horizon Forbidden West, pa-ching, there is your video. Now I'm stuck at the bottom of the pile and have just got to wait and see how it all unfolds. But enjoying the game in real time with my audience is going to be pretty cool as well. I'll be putting a lot of posts out, no spoilers. And my God, the camera mode is going to stop my life for a good couple of weeks to get my head right. It's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm going to put a Digital Foundry link in. They're doing the comparisons. There is a PlayStation Pro and 5 comparison videos available already. I'll be sticking those in the links. I commenced the recording of one of my largest local gaming PvP lists, and I've taken the choice not to include fighters or FIFA games. Maybe that can be another list for another time. This is like AA or cool little indie game. Some of them you may not have heard of before. I've tried to go off the beaten track with it, and I've got some poor friends arriving tomorrow to go through it all with me. Are you there?